In 1990, NBC greenlit a primetime high school musical, choreographed by the same guy who would later make High School Musical, that featured a young Trey Parker, the future creator of South Park, performing as a breakdancing rapper. It lasted 8 episodes, and that wasn't even the weirdest thing NBC tried. See, for most of the 1990s, ABC owned Friday nights. Their secret weapon was a little programming block called TGIF, a lineup of family sitcoms so dominant that on a single Friday in November of 1989, approximately 86 million viewers tuned in across just 4 shows. NBC wanted a piece of that. What they got instead was a decade-long identity crisis, filled with bizarre experiments, baffling scheduling decisions, and some of the strangest shows you've never heard of. This is the story of when NBC tried to answer TGIF, and everything went sideways. If you're the kind of person who remembers racing home on Friday nights to park yourself in front of the TV, do me a favor and hit that like button and subscribe. Trust me, this one's a wild ride. The machine that was TGIF. To understand why NBC's response was so chaotic, you first have to understand what they were up against. Because TGIF wasn't just a collection of shows, it was a machine. The block officially launched on September 22, 1989. But here's the thing most people don't realize. The shows were already there. Perfect Strangers had been on ABC's Friday schedule since March of 1988. Full House was already a hit. Family Matters was brand new but built on a proven formula. The genius wasn't the programming, it was the packaging. A promo writer named Jim Janicek came up with the idea of wrapping these Friday sitcoms into a branded block, with host segments connecting the shows. The name? TGIF. Now, everyone assumed it stood for Thank God It's Friday, but ABC couldn't actually use that because of a trademark conflict with the TGI Fridays restaurant chain. So Bob Iger, yes, that Bob Iger, who was then president of ABC Entertainment, reportedly landed on Thank Goodness It's Funny as the official tagline, a workaround that became iconic. The production engine behind TGIF was largely Miller Boyett Productions, Thomas L. Miller and Robert L. Boyett, along with Bickley Warren Productions, who ran Family Matters. These producers didn't just make one hit. They supplied 4 out of 5 anchor slots at the block's peak. ABC essentially had a family sitcom factory, and that factory was running at full capacity. The results were staggering. On November 10, 1989, Nielsen data shows what a single TGIF Friday looked like. Just the 10 of Us pulled roughly 18.5 million viewers. Perfect Strangers grabbed about 20.5 million. Family Matters hit nearly 22 million. And Full House topped them all at around 25 million. That's one Friday night, one network, 4 shows. And the audience just kept climbing from 8 o'clock to 10. ABC dominated the 18 to 49 demographic on Fridays for essentially the entire first half of the 90s, as Ted Harbert, who served as president of ABC Entertainment starting in late 1992, once explained. Once teenagers can get out of the house on a Friday night, they leave. What you're left with is parents and their kids, and TGIF was built precisely for that audience. So that's the mountain NBC was staring at, a branded, well-oiled audience-tested block backed by a dedicated production pipeline, a clear demographic target, and a cultural identity so strong that kids were literally planning their Friday nights around it. Now let's talk about what NBC did in response. Spoiler, it was not that. The early Misfires, 1990 to 1992. NBC's Friday night lineup heading into the TGIF era was about as far from family comedy as you could get. We're talking Baywatch, Hardball, Hunter, Midnight Caller, shows built for a male-skewing action audience. Gary Cole playing an ex-cop talk radio host on Midnight Caller is a great show, but it's not exactly competing with Urkel for the hearts of America's 10-year-olds. The first real attempt to shake things up came in the fall of 1990, and this is where it starts getting weird. NBC rolled out Hull High, a primetime musical drama, Set in a high school, think Fame meets Beverly Hills 90210, except it aired in the same season as ABC's legendary flop Cop Rock. So apparently, everyone in television simultaneously decided that audiences wanted characters to burst into song for no reason. Hull High was choreographed by Kenny Ortega, who would go on to direct High School Musical for Disney 16 years later. The show also featured a young Trey Parker. Yes, the Trey Parker, performing as part of an in-show breakdancing rap group called the Hull High Devils. It lasted 8 aired episodes before NBC pulled the plug. That same season, NBC tried Working It Out, a Friday night sitcom starring Jane Curtin and Stephen Collins as divorced parents who meet in a cooking class. It was created by Bill Persky, and Washington Post critic Tom Shales wrote that it played so bright and civilized that you could almost mistake it for British, which he called a pleasant surprise from, and I'm paraphrasing here, a network he didn't hold in high esteem. Despite the kind review, it was gone by December after 13 episodes. Meanwhile, NBC's Friday anchor was Quantum Leap, which is a beloved show but was fundamentally a sci-fi drama, not a family sitcom. It aired at 8 o'clock on Fridays during the 1990-91 season, before being moved off the night entirely. So by the end of 1991, NBC had tried action shows, a musical, a divorced parents' rom-com, and a time travel drama on Friday nights. None of it worked against TGIF, and none of it was even trying to be the same kind of show. The 1991-92 season brought more whiplash. NBC loaded Friday with Reasonable Doubts, a legal drama starring Mark Harmon and Marlee Matlin, and I'll Fly Away, a critically acclaimed period drama set during the civil rights era created by Joshua Brand and John Falsey. I'll Fly Away was genuinely great television. It was also genuinely unpopular television, finishing 67th in the ratings its first season. NBC kept moving it around the schedule, from 9 o'clock to 10 o'clock, desperately trying to find it an audience. This is the core tension of NBC's entire Friday night problem in this era. The shows weren't necessarily bad. Some of them were quite good, but they had absolutely nothing to do with the audience TGIF was serving. It was like bringing a chess set to a dodgeball game. The Big Swing Year, 1993. If there was one season where NBC came closest to actually trying to clone TGIF, it was 1993-94. But in true NBC fashion, almost none of it happened on Friday. Let's start with what did happen on Friday. NBC launched Against the Grain, a high school football drama based on Buzz Bissinger's work, the same source material that would later inspire Friday Night Lights. The show featured a 21-year-old Ben Affleck, 5 years before Good Will Hunting. Variety reported that NBC was hoping the show's characters could coax viewers away from family matters. That is an actual thing a trade publication wrote. NBC thought a gritty Texas football drama could steal the audience from Steve Urkel. It could not. Against the Grain lasted 8 episodes and was gone by Christmas. Alongside it, NBC revived its old mystery movie wheel format from the 1970s as the NBC Friday Night Mystery, a rotating slate of 2-hour TV movies airing at 9 o'clock. This included heart-to-heart reunion films with Robert Wagner and Stephanie Powers, Perry Mason TV movies with Raymond Burr, and a new series called McShane starring Kenny Rogers as a Vegas gambler turned house detective. Let me say that again. Kenny Rogers as a house detective on Friday nights, opposite Boy Meets World. There was also Staying Afloat with Larry Hagman as a jet-setting government operative. The whole wheel ran from fall 1993 into 1995, but it was essentially a dumping ground for unsold pilots dressed up as event television. But the real attempted TGIF clone, that was on Saturday. Warren Littlefield, who became NBC Entertainment president in 1993, under West Coast president Don Ohlmeyer, oversaw a Saturday night lineup that was explicitly designed as a family comedy block. The Mommies at 8, Café Américain at 8:30, Empty Nest at 9, Nurses at 9:30, and Sisters at 10. The Mommies was based on a real-life Petaluma comedy duo, Carol Christensen and Marilyn Kentz, who had built a following doing live comedy about motherhood. The show was promoted with the tagline, "Comedy for women who don't want sex more than once a month." Variety was not kind. Café Américain starred Valerie Bertinelli as a recently divorced American waitress, working in a Paris cafe. It had a wild behind-the-scenes life. Marion Ross, yes, Mrs. C from Happy Days, was brought in to replace actress Lila Kay in a key role. Then Kay was brought back. Rue McClanahan turned the role down entirely, and in episode 7, Eddie Van Halen made a cameo as a street musician who gets chased out of the cafe by the character played by his then-wife Valerie Bertinelli. Café Américain lasted 18 episodes before NBC pulled it in February 1994, with 2 leftover episodes burned off in May. NBC canceled The Mommies, Café Américain, and Nurses together. The Saturday family comedy block was effectively dead by the spring of 1995. NBC's closest attempt at TGIF clone didn't even share the same night of the week, and it still failed. The Scattered Attempts, 1994 to 1996. After the Saturday block collapsed, NBC didn't give up on family-friendly sitcoms entirely. They just scattered them across the schedule like someone throwing darts blindfolded. Someone Like Me launched on Monday nights in March of 1994, a show created by Bruce Helford and executive produced by Gail Berman, who would later become president of Fox and then Paramount. It starred 11-year-old Gabby Hoffman, whose real-life mother was Andy Warhol superstar Viva. The show was reportedly inspired by a New York Times article about Hoffman's upbringing in the Chelsea Hotel. Patricia Heaton, years before Everybody Loves Raymond, played the mom. Nikki Cox played the older sister. NBC pulled it after 5 aired episodes. Then came Brotherly Love in September 1995, starring Joey, Matthew, and Andrew Lawrence, 3 real-life brothers in a show about 3 brothers. It had a classic TGIF-style premise, wholesome family comedy, kid-friendly humor, recognizable young stars. But NBC scheduled it on Sunday at 6 o'clock in the evening. It finished 104th in the Nielsen ratings. NBC dropped it after 16 episodes in April 1996, and the WB picked it up immediately because the WB recognized what NBC apparently couldn't, which was that this was a TGIF show that had been placed on entirely the wrong network. And then there's the strangest cancellation story of the whole era, Madman of the People. This one didn't air on Fridays either. It was on Thursdays at 9:30, but it perfectly illustrates NBC's priorities. Starring Dabney Coleman, the show finished number 12 in household ratings for the 1994-95 season, with a 14.9 share. Number 12. That's a hit by any normal standard. And NBC canceled it anyway, because the Thursday 9:30 slot was needed to anchor the Friends-Seinfeld ER lineup. NBC literally killed a top 15 show to protect must-see TV. That single decision tells you everything about where family comedy ranked in NBC's strategic hierarchy. Nowhere near the top. Why NBC could never crack the code. At this point, you might be wondering, why? Why couldn't the most powerful network of the 1990s figure out how to make a family Friday block? And the answer is actually pretty simple. They didn't really want to. Warren Littlefield described NBC's internal philosophy as the 3 a.m. rule. The idea was that you could wake up anyone at NBC at 3 in the morning, and they could tell you exactly what the network wanted. And what NBC wanted was Seinfeld, Friends, Frasier, Mad About You, ER, urban, sophisticated, adult-skewing comedy and drama. That was the brand. Family-friendly Friday sitcoms weren't just off the schedule. They were off-brand. That wasn't accidental. In May of 1992, NBC publicly announced a pivot toward younger demographics, specifically the 18 to 34 urban audience that advertisers valued most. As part of that move, NBC shipped off older skewing hits like Matlock, In the Heat of the Night, and The Golden Palace to other networks. That's the exact opposite of what you'd do if you were building a TGIF competitor. You'd need those audiences. NBC deliberately shed them. There was also a pipeline problem. ABC's TGIF worked because Miller Boyett Productions was a machine. They could develop, produce, and deliver multiple family sitcoms simultaneously, and those shows had a consistent tone and style. NBC had no equivalent supplier. Their hot producers, Whit Thomas Harris, Castle Rock, Brillstein Gray, made workplace comedies and adult-oriented shows. Nobody at NBC was tooled up to produce the kind of warm, multi-camera, family-first sitcoms that TGIF ran on. And finally, there was the Disney factor. When Disney acquired ABC in 1995, it instantly reinforced TGIF's family branding with the most powerful family entertainment brand on the planet. NBC, which was owned by General Electric at the time, had no comparable family IP or identity to draw on. The moat around TGIF got deeper at the exact moment NBC might have considered a serious challenge. What NBC actually found on Fridays. Here's the irony of this whole story. While NBC was flailing with musical high schools and Paris Cafe sitcoms, and Kenny Rogers detective movies, they were also accidentally stumbling into the Friday night formula that every network would eventually adopt. In January of 1994, NBC moved Homicide: Life on the Street to Friday nights at 10 o'clock. Created by Paul Atanasio and based on David Simon's book. Yes, the David Simon who later created The Wire. It was prestige drama before we called it prestige drama. Tom Fontana and Barry Levinson were behind it. It ran on Fridays through 1999 and gave NBC a credible, critically respected Friday anchor. Dateline NBC, which had premiered back in March of 1992, gradually became the network's Friday workhorse. It was cheap to produce, endlessly repeatable, and drew a reliable audience. By 1997, Dateline was a Friday fixture, and it's still there today. Unsolved Mysteries with Robert Stack served as the Friday lead-in for most of the mid-90s, from roughly 1994 to 1997, when it was replaced by Players, a Dick Wolf show starring Ice-T as an ex-con turned FBI informant. Players lasted 18 episodes before it was frequently preempted and quietly disappeared. So by the late 90s, NBC's Friday night had settled into a pattern. Reality-adjacent programming, plus drama, plus Dateline. No comedies, no family block, no branded rapper. Just a functional, low-cost lineup that didn't try to compete with TGIF head-on. How TGIF died anyway. And here's the thing nobody expected. TGIF didn't need NBC to kill it. It killed itself, with some help from CBS. In the 1997-98 season, CBS launched something called the CBS Block Party, reportedly spending around $40 million to lure Family Matters and Step by Step away from ABC. That's right, CBS literally bought two of TGIF's anchor shows out from under the block. The CBS Block Party flopped after one season, but the damage was done. TGIF's lineup was fragmented. Its anchor shows were aging or gone, and the audience was scattering. The original TGIF block officially ended on September 8, 2000. ABC tried to revive it twice, once from 2003 to 2005, with shows like George Lopez and Hope and Faith, and again briefly in 2018 with Speechless and Fresh Off the Boat. Neither revival stuck. Meanwhile, NBC's Friday strategy, the one they stumbled into after years of failed experiments, became the industry's standard. Today, Every major broadcast network treats Friday as a lower-tier programming night built around procedural drama, reality TV, or news magazines. Nobody programs family sitcom blocks on Fridays anymore. The TGIF model, which seemed so unbeatable in 1993, turned out to be a product of a very specific cultural moment that couldn't be replicated. Not by NBC, not by CBS, and eventually, not even by ABC itself. The real lesson. So what's the takeaway from all this? NBC never really copied TGIF. That's the punchline. They spent nearly a decade trying everything else. A teen musical with the future South Park creator. A mystery wheel with Kenny Rogers as a detective. A Saturday night comedy block headlined by a duo whose selling point was jokes about avoiding intimacy. A Ben Affleck football drama scheduled opposite Steve Urkel. A Valerie Bertinelli sitcom set in Paris, where her real-life husband showed up as an extra. And a top 12 rated show they canceled because it wasn't Friends. None of it was a coherent strategy. None of it was a branded block. And none of it worked. But in the long run, the chaotic process of elimination led NBC to the Friday formula that every network now uses. Don't fight for Friday, just survive it. TGIF was lightning in a bottle, a perfect alignment of the right producers, the right shows, the right audience, and the right cultural moment. NBC learned the hard way that you can't manufacture that. You can try to counter-program it. You can try to outspend it. You can even try to poach its shows, but you can't copy it. And if you don't believe me, just ask Kenny Rogers. He was a house detective for exactly one season. And then he went back to singing about knowing when to fold them, which, when you think about it, is advice NBC could have used a whole lot sooner. If you enjoyed this deep dive into one of the weirdest chapters in 90s television history, make sure you like this video and subscribe to the channel. Drop a comment and tell me, what was your favorite TGIF show? Were you a Full House family or a Family Matters household? I want to know. Until next time.